Welcome back for part two of It's Okay Not to Be Okay, Spring Edition. That's what we're calling this podcast, I guess, now. So, for those people that weren't here last time, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself? And then today we will just kind of continue on. I met with several students last week who are really excited that you're here, and I have some really fun questions to kind of throw at you. And then we want to, again, just like continue to hear from you about like how you have made it through all of the fun things in life while still loving life. So,
Okay.
it's kind of the sentiment I got from several people. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I graduated from Barlow in 2012. I moved to Boston for school at Boston Conservatory of Music to study musical theater and get my BFA for 4 years there. I graduated from there in 2016. Moved to the city and moved to New York. And have now, this fall been in the city for 5 years, which feels insane. It's strange that it doesn't feel like 5 years at all because thankfully, I feel very, very fortunate, very blessed. I've been fortunate to work a lot post graduation, so that has afforded me a lot of opportunities to leave the city for work, which is the goal. But it's hard. It's hard to establish sort of every time I come back from a contract, I feel like I'm sort of like starting at ground zero again. In terms of it's hard to make friends again and to sort of build your life up and find consistency and that like comfort when your life is so transient. I mean, that's what I signed up for and I love it, but it also is very hard. Grew up in the Gresham area. My parents super involved in the community. My mom started her business 30 years ago, and Cindy's Window Fashions, which is by Gresham Station, and they have 2 locations now, one there and one in downtown Portland. And so my sister works for the family business now, and it's all been like sort of all in the family. I'm the black sheep that left and wanted to go pursue my dreams outside of Oregon. But I miss it all the time. And I did a national tour. I did the Kinky Boots national tour and in the closing company. And I will say, touring the United States and Canada, other than Canada, I discovered that we are very spoiled in Oregon. I think I expected the country to look like Oregon. And I was disappointed. So count your blessings about how beautiful the terrain and the everywhere is in Oregon. And like while you're in school, I would encourage you, soak up the time in the city, soak up the time at going on hikes and getting out in nature. Not to say that like the rest of the country isn't beautiful, but like there is now when I talk to people, there is something so special about the Pacific Northwest in general, and Oregon is just, you guys know, is just magic. Every time I fly home, my mom always makes fun of me. Her favorite thing when they pick me up in the airport is coming out of PDX and just like, I always just take this like breath of like breathing in Oregon air after you've been on a long day of traveling from New York City air is a breath of fresh air for sure. So, but yeah, and so now I live in Manhattan full time. I was home because of COVID for the last year, living with my parents for the first time 24/7 in a decade, which was very hard, but very rewarding. And I got back to the city and have been back now for 5 weeks. That's me. That's where I'm at.
Cool. One of our questions that a student had was, it's pretty simple, maybe. It was, what is your favorite thing about living in New York? You kind of shared some of the gems of living here, but what's your favorite part about living in New York currently?
Oh my God, so many things. The first thing that comes to mind is, especially like young people, everyone, my favorite part of New York is the tenacity. Like you don't come here unless you're like chasing after something. And that's not just like my own industry. That's not just musical theater. I mean, the tenacity inside of my industry is incredible to witness and to be a part of. And that like pulsating feeling inside the theater community is a beautiful thing. But that feeling of what New York does to you in a beautiful way, but also in a very hard way, that if you're not careful can make you very jaded very quickly, because it's hard. I mean, every like, I think that you have your hopes and your dreams of what you want New York to be, and it is all of those things. It's more than those things. But I think also that I specifically kind of had it on this pedestal and kind of just like sort of in my mind sort of dissipated the cliches I had heard of the city. But I'm here to tell you that like all of those cliches are rooted in truth and like what people have been through in the city. I think it just I had a friend that said to make it through a day you have to like, before you leave the house, you have to put on your armor. And that phrase has always stuck with me, because like when my parents came for the first time to visit, we were like on the subway, and it's just my mom's heart, and that's why I love her, and that's like my upbringing, and just like seeing people that way. I love that. But like it was so fascinating to see them like day one, my mom like getting so, her being such an empath, I get that from her, like seeing someone that is destitute or seeing somebody that is homeless. And like, I mean, it is very much, you go in downtown Portland has one of the highest homeless populations in our country. But in New York, you're like living with it, as opposed to like being in the comfort of your car and seeing that outside of you, or someone like knocking on your car asking for money or whatever, where you in New York, you are living with these people. And so my parents coming to town, it was interesting for me, having already been here for a while, to watch them take this in. And I had realized, like, I was like, oh my gosh, my armor has gotten so thick. And I didn't like that. Like, I didn't like that I had kind of stopped seeing people that are struggling, and that no one, that is different cards that people have been dealt, and no one wakes up every day and wants to be homeless. Like that is, life has gotten these people to that place. And so like it breaks your heart. But when you're eventually to be able to do your own thing and to be successful, but to survive, if you will, here, you have to put that armor on, and you have to go about your day. But I think like maybe 2 years in was when that happened. And it was this like reminder of like, Andrew, how can I like daily like see people for who they are and meet them where they're at, still being safe and still having awareness, but being letting someone know that you're seeing them and that you care, because there is a lack of care, because people are just, it's fast, it's so fast paced. I love that about New York, but I have to be reminded, my West Coast roots have to often, people and that feeling have to remind me that sometimes you have to slow down and like see that person and assist them onto the train, or help that woman with her stroller coming down the stairs, and you're passing her, but like asking them if they need help. It's like, it's those moments. So like that, the humanity inside of the grind is probably, that was a very long-winded way of saying, as you all that are returners know, everything I answer is long-winded.
That's fun. So I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and moved to Portland 8.5 years ago. And it's really fun to watch how my parents, with their very Southern tendencies, come to Portland, where everyone is who they are unashamedly, and everyone expresses themselves in very different ways than maybe they do in the South.
Right.
Just witnessing how people are. And I also think there's so much treasure in coming and going from where you grew up, because you learn new things about where you are from that you appreciate differently.
Oh, yeah.
And Nashville has become a tourist destination in a way it wasn't when I was growing up. So it's really fun to just like notice the ways things change and the ways things don't change, and figure out who you are amidst all of that. Because I'm sure New York this year feels maybe different than New York a year ago in some ways.
Right.
Because many of the industries, I wonder if it's similar to Portland, where so many of our industries were service industry, and that was so closed for a long time. So people had to make a different choice. And bridging from that, I heard you say like I wrote down starting at ground zero. I don't remember what sentence you were saying that in, but I have heard from a lot of students that their experience about going back to school, whether that be in 2 weeks or in the fall, kind of feels like that with friendships in some ways, because you don't
Mm-hmm.
actually know, like, you don't know what you're going back to in a lot of different ways. Um, the building's very different. The teachers are different. If you're a freshman, you have never even been there. So what
That's
insight could you
crazy.
offer 15-year-olds who are going through the experience of starting at ground zero of high school, of all things, in the pandemic in 2 weeks?
I think the first thing that comes to mind, I think it comes back to like what we have been saying and what we've been calling this is like, I think it's okay to not be okay. I think, number one, remember that the uncertainty you are feeling that feels scary to voice, everyone around you is feeling it too, and they also don't want to voice it because that being vulnerable inside of uncertainty is really hard. And um, going back to a place, that's what trauma is. That's what grief is. Like, for a lot of people, number one, you have excitement in life and you have preconceived notions for a freshman, like you said, that is excited about what this high school experience is going to be. And then when those expectations are broken, that is this sense of loss for something that you have built up in your life that you've now never gotten to have the way that you had hoped. And even though we make plans and we have expectations, and then those things change, they still might happen. And so then we're inside of the change and we don't think about it. But in this sense, with COVID, like, this has been like a hard and fast stop in every sense of the word, and not going to back to normalcy for anyone that's returning to Barlow, or like you said, like, is going to return and it's going to look quite different, or someone's going to not even return but arrive for the first time. Number one, that blows my mind. Number two, I think the secret is recognizing that everyone around you is in the same boat, and raising your hand or reaching out to a friend, reaching out to a teacher or to any staff member, that number one, those teachers are also, I guarantee you, just as fearful and like like teachers are incredible people, but they're also human. Like, they have been going through this year too, and these things and these protocols, and at the end of the day, teachers just want their students to be safe, and want their students to learn. And so this is going to be a thing that all of you are navigating together for the first time together, and it's going to be everything of however much the adults can plan and have meetings. You can have all these things in place, but things will go wrong. Things that people had hoped would be correct will change. Everyone's just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. Like, that's what this whole year has been for everyone in the world, like, making it up as we go. And I think it's just about, number one, giving yourself grace. Number two, not being upset when your expectations of what this new uh, intermittent normal might look like, and not holding tightly to those expectations, because then when they change, you don't want that to like break your own spirit. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that is what for me has kept me. I mean, I don't want to throw around the word sane loosely, because I feel so stuck in my head and I feel
Like
very,
grounded.
very, very lost most of this year. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing that brings me back to myself, and to trying to find content, like we talked about last time, and trying to tap into my own bravery, and trying to just like be with myself and be okay sitting inside of all of the questions I have, all of the fears I have of my job, of my future, of literally just like what this day looks like with me interacting with people, and what that's going to look like for students moving forward and teachers. Um, yeah, I think my advice would just be, reach out to people. Like, I promise you, it's going to feel like you are fully out of control. So just like expect that there are going to be, that everything is going to feel new. It's you are going to feel totally out of control. But if you can now prepare your body and think about, okay, when a teacher tells me another protocol or something that I did wrong, instead of being reactionary, instead of being afraid, I'm just going to prepare myself to just take anything that's going to come at me, however it's going to come. And I'm just going to like prepare my body and my mind to just be receptive and to just listen and to just take in the information. Because at the end of the day, you are going to this place that's going to look very different than what you've seen it as before. You're going to this place to learn. So, but then when it comes to the social side of it, like you said before, that is really hard. And I think that it comes back to number one, just giving yourself grace, because number one, no one has ever done this before. So there isn't a crystal ball, and there isn't anyone that can tell you like the best way to go back to school after you've been home for a year from a pandemic is this, so that you can really connect with friends. Like, I guarantee that all of you have been struggling and have, I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I'm not in school anymore, but this dynamic of what it means to have so much time with our loved ones and with our family, and so much less time with our friends and leaders in our lives and our teachers, and these communities that make us and who we are, and bring us joy outside of our families. All of that has changed this year. And I think like I said, returning back to this new normal. And somebody said a few weeks back, saying like, let's try to build back, instead of like trying to be like hell-bent on like getting what we had back. I don't know that we can ever do that, and I don't know that we want to, because I think that we have all, I know I can only speak for myself, I have learned so many things about myself from this year that I would never have ever learned without this gift of time. Now, this is a gift of time we never asked for, but it's here. And instead, I think the secret is, instead of continuing to be frustrated by everything we've lost, I think it's all about mindset. I think it comes back to like pivoting our mindset to entering into these unknowns with an intention of, I have no idea what my day at school is going to look like today. I have no idea if I'm going to have the relationship I had with my friends last early spring. I mean, it's wild that it's been over a year since all of you left school. Like, all of those things are 100% valid, and you are feeling them, and they are in your head, and you need to think those things. But I would challenge you and encourage you to try to make more of your focus on a day-to-day basis inside of those things that make you scared and uncomfortable and fearful. Make more of your focus on, I am really proud that this year I have learned this about myself. I'm going to bring that into my day at school, and I'm terrified of this day today, but I know that I can make it through this day by bringing in this piece of myself that I've learned from this year and this time that I never had before. And I think that that also goes back to like, yeah, we got to build back better, because we as a culture, as a society, as a country have unlearned, and we needed to, a lot of things that have been weighing on the pulse and the culture and the heart and soul of our nation and our world. And this has sort of shed this like floodlight on a lot of problems that we've had as a country and as a people and just as humans, of how we treat each other. And I think that, why would we ever want to do life the way we were doing before this virus came and revealed all of the ways in which we were, I think failing is the wrong word. I think the ways in which we were not as open-minded as I think everyone has been. And I think that I think we have a lot of stuff to get through still as a people. I think there is still a lot um, of denial in terms of a lot of subject matter. And we don't even really need to get into that. It's just like, it comes back to just the way that if we are not right with ourselves and checking in with ourselves every day, we are never going to be able to show up for others. And 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 that can look like so many things. If that for you, like in my own life, if that for you looks like your faith, if that and your own connection to something bigger than you, then incredible. If that is a specific person in your life that you check in with that holds you accountable, incredible. Like everyone has the way that they fill their spirit, and I think that that's what it comes back to, is like, don't those ways, like we talked about last time, those ways that you find joy, those ways that you like fill your cup, make sure you are always checking in with those things. And like when these days are going to be hard, when these days are scary at school, lean on the people and just like, don't be afraid to be that person to your friends that is the first to speak up and be like, you guys, this day sucks. I'm so overwhelmed. Are you overwhelmed? Because I'm here to tell you, I guarantee that if you just light that fire, you will start this conversation and open that lid that is just going to be this like breath of fresh air with all of your friends of something all of you are feeling. That number one, you're all feeling like right now, like at home through a screen, which is awful. So there's going to be like joy in being together again, but there's also going to be like grief in like what it means to be doing that now, whether that's with a mask on, whatever that looks like for Oregon moving forward. And also it's going to be like a lot of sadness of like all of the time that you feel like you've missed, and don't feel like you have to like make up for any of that. Just try to like I said, like try to be present, try to be with yourself and be proud that you have gotten through this and that you're going to be showing up to this reunion. It can be a beautiful thing. So inside of that fear, hold on to, you should be proud of yourself that you're returning to school. That is a feat in and of itself, that the community that our world has gotten us to that place. Because that's what we've learned from this time, is that that's not a guarantee. Like, who knows? It might not work, and then 3 weeks later, everyone's told to go home again. Nobody knows. And like, knock on wood, I hope that doesn't happen. But I think what this year has taught us is that like anything could happen in the next 5 minutes. So it's about being present and showing up for yourself first, showing up for others around you, I would just encourage you, like, your teachers have been working their butts off to get you to be able to come back to school, to prepare the school, their classrooms, whatever curriculum, whatever this is going to look like. That has been so many hours of work that people have put into. So I would just like say, like, even though it might feel awkward to like put yourself out there, like, go be that person that makes your teacher's day and like sees your teacher and what they're going through. Be that person that's like a little bit wise beyond your years and like isn't just like the student that's like getting through, even though getting through is okay. But if like you have that in you and you can like show up for your teacher and be like, thank you for everything you're doing, that thank you can go a long ways, because I guarantee that a lot of them feel like they are drowning. So they are a human being too, just like you. They also have been a student just like you, and they teach because they want to give back to you. So showing up for them, I think, is a gift you can give them in a very small way, and it takes about this much effort.
Thanks. And I think like it's also really important, what I have been trying to remind students and adults of, is that even if people wait until the fall to come back to school, all of these things that we're feeling right now are still true in August, September, January 2022.
Right.
The transition is not a one day. You don't get back and a switch flips.
Not a light switch.
So, yeah, unfortunately, I know many of us probably wish that our emotions sometimes worked that way because it would make them easier.
Right.
But they don't. So if you thought that they did, they don't. Newsflash. Bubble is burst. Your emotions are a spectrum. Healing and trauma recovery are not a one-day thing. And so I guess a question that several people had, but one person in particular phrased it well, is several people noticed last time that you are excellent at conveying your passion, and you're also just very full, like you express everything that you want to express, and you express it like unapologetically. Like, this is what I have to say. I'm going to say it with my voice, my face, my body language. And you do it in such a way that like really engages people. And several people were curious if you know kind of how you acquired that skill, because they also wanted to acquire said skill.
Well, first, I just want to say that that means a lot to me to hear that feedback and to know that that is meaningful to someone. And here's why: because um, woo, I don't often feel that way. People tell me that, but it's, and I think that that just speaks to the fact that in this crazy thing called life, like we never know what somebody else is going through, and we never know where somebody is at. Um, People tell me all the time that I am strong, but that is a daily battle and struggle that is my own conversation with myself to navigate and to believe myself. Um, I don't even know where to begin answering the question, because I feel like I was put on this earth to make people feel better. Um, I feel I feel I feel energized. I am such an extrovert, as you can probably notice. That's what the question's about. But on a more serious level, like I I find this passion, and I think I find my energy and my ability to communicate, which, like, all of that is very, like, kind and very flattering to hear, but it's like I often don't feel like that, because I am so in my head. And like, just to like explain that a little bit, I like, since I got back to New York, it has been very hard. It's been very confronting to have spent a year being with people, being with my family, being with people that I could have like talk out how I'm feeling, because I love to talk. But it's been really, really hard to be back here. And like 5 weeks in, I don't know that I have ever felt more lonely in my life than I feel right now. And I'm not saying that to you to be like, oh, Andrew, I'm so sorry. I'm saying it because I think that um, it speaks to, you have to find you have to find the things, the job, the people, the atmosphere, the energy, the the places that bring you joy, and the places that make you feel like the person you love about yourself. And like, self-love is a journey that is like ever changing and very, very hard to navigate. But the reason I bring up the thing about feeling like lonely since I've moved back is like, it's been just very confronting to go from being surrounded by people all the time and being able to have these sounding boards to bounce information and ideas and my sadness off of, that see me when I don't want to talk about what I'm going through and like are like calling me out on it. And then to go fully back into my New York life of like being very isolated and like, excuse me, there's only so many times I can just like rearrange my living room and decorate. Like, at some point, I gotta like face the music and sit with myself and be okay being uncomfortable. But I reached back out to you and asked if we could do this again. And I think that that comes back to like, if there's one thing I do know that I'm good at, let me like tie this back in and return to answer the actual question, Andrew. Tangents, we love them. Is If there's one thing I know that I'm really, really good at, and sometimes it's a double-edged sword, is being like relentless about being my own advocate. And like, I was so fed in the most like profound way to be able to, that anyone was interested in like hearing from me. um and so encouraged that like I wanted to reach back out to you and be like, can we do that again? connecting with you guys on social media later and watching the recording back and being like, oh, like, and that's the thing. It's like this journey of life of realizing that when you have abilities, or when you feel that, we talked about this last time, like, what is it that, find that thing in your life that makes you feel full of joy. And like, it's the same thing. It's the reason I perform. Like, the high that I get on stage, watching what I am doing, changing someone in the audience, bringing them joy, making them feel seen, that like live interaction, there's nothing like that. And like, this is very similar through a screen, I hope in person someday. But I think that I find that that passion inside of me, and I think that I have learned to be more unapologetic about my beliefs, about um, about how I feel, about showing my heart, wearing my heart on my sleeve, and not apologizing for it. That has been a trial and error, messy, hot mess express train that has taken time. And it's like, it's its own thing that changes every day. And there are days that I want to like crawl inside a little hole and not be strong and like not show up for people. But I think that I realize that like, those moments when I want to stop are exactly when I need to lean in. Like, those moments are like, is literally life holding a mirror up to me, being like, Andrew, you are so good at like giving your friend advice and encouraging them till the cows come home, but I'm so bad at taking it myself. And so, number one, I just truly am very grateful that one, that's even a question, and two, that anyone sees that in me, because I think that is like the nature of what we're all trying to find in life. Is validation is the wrong word. We all as humans just want to feel seen and heard and needed. And so to know that me sharing my truth helped you on the other side of this, anyone, whoever wrote that question, whoever it may be that might watch this in the future, knowing that me sharing where I'm at is allowing you to feel empowered and to be like, hey, I want to like a piece of like what he has to say. I want you to know that that secret of whatever, like what you're asking me of, like, what would be your secret weapon, or what's your advice, or like, how do you do that? I don't know that it's something that you I don't know that it's something that you can learn. I think that it's something that is inside of you. And I don't mean I mean it's something that you have to learn and work on within you. It's not something that is like taught, or that like I've like watched a lot of people that are passionate. Like, I think that it just comes back to what I talked about last time, which is when you find that thing in your life that brings you joy, like that effervescent quality and joy that is like unabashed, that is just fully like the full body chills and tingles when you are communing with other people. And I think, and I kind of alluded to this when we talked the first time, like, I think that high, when you find what it is that brings you the most joy, I don't think that thing exists without encountering at least another human being. And I think that comes back to like, we are not on this earth to just like make money and die one day. Like, we are here to make each other stronger, to grow, to make the world a better place, to encourage each other, to if you are just surviving, you're not living. And I think that like, when you're living, things are going to be harder. But like, I think we want it that way. We should want it that way. And I think that a lot of times society and media and the way we're brought up, like it's just, you are, especially like the American way is just like you're told to like work hard, and like if you have that like family of four and that white picket fence, like then you've reached success. If you do all of those things, I promise you that is happiness. And like I'm here to tell you that like the most incredible people I have met in my life that are what I would call like walking through their day-to-day life like unapologetically, fiercely themselves, all of them are so different. And all of their stories and their lives are so different. But at the root of who they are, they enter every day trying to find that joy, and they are just kind. Like they are just kind souls. And like, number one, you're not going to get anywhere by being a jerk. Like if you like, if you think that like, just buying into this notion of like being the best at something is gonna like get you somewhere, it might give you a high for like 2.5 seconds, but that is fleeting. Like that feeling of like belonging to something and the feeling of community and that joy inside of you, that comes from building somebody up. That feeling comes from someone seeing the thing from last time, having their own bravery to write that question and to tell me that what I said meant something to them. Like that is that feeling. It's a back and forth. It's an exchange. That's humanity at its core. So I think 20 hours later, when Andrew finishes answering the question, I think that is something that I think that's something that is inside of you, and it's just going to take you time to realize what that's going to look like. And that feeling, that exchange looks different for everyone. So like if your version of that is not being bubbly or being extroverted or wanting to speak publicly or whatever, like the way that you show up for others, everyone's is going to look different. I mean, maybe if this specific person like wants to like talk to me because of what your own goals are, and maybe they're similar to mine, please reach out privately and let's talk. I would love to talk to you about like where you're at, but just on like a more like broad for anyone sense, I think that feeling of like being true to yourself and being passionate and being expressive, I think that is going to look different and should look different for everybody. I mean, there's definitely like tools and people that have taught me ways to be more communicative, but I think also like I watch things back, or I there's some ways in which I interact with people that I like can't stand about myself, but we all have those things. Um, yeah, I should just let you ask another question. I don't know if that even answered it.
I think that's a great answer, and I imagine it probably answered the question. The next one, I have a question, but I'll ask one of the other questions that was given to me first. That's sort of a two-part. The first part is just after the book that you're currently writing, do you know what else you want to write about? And the second part that I added is, I'm curious how you decide when you're writing, like how do you decide what's worth writing to share out and what's kind of just your diary and your process? I imagine sometimes there's an overlap,
Yeah.
but yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's so many things. Number one, the Defining Brave, the memoir project has been a very long time coming. The thing that I just announced today, with the new updated version of the book cover on my Instagram and my Facebook page, is I'm at this stage now where I am now what's called query letters. I'm querying and reaching out to try essentially to have somebody buy the rights to the book, and I am pursuing traditional publishing with my memoir. So I've been working on the memoir for 5 years. That, to answer your question, started and as journals, and was very, very private, very for myself. Didn't really have the like device that the book has now. Didn't really. What I started with those journals, like no one is ever going to read those, and if you read those and compared them to what the book is now, it is literally night and day. But that's just part of the process. My journey with writing has really been kind of the thing that has like changed my life and saved my life through this massive season of death and of loss in my family, which is what the book is about. And I talked about this a little bit last time when I talked about that paper for my honors English class my senior year for my college essay. Like, I have always had a lot of fear and a lot of imposter syndrome about feeling like, who am I to be a writer? And I've always hated reading when I was little. And I think that once I graduated college and was not being told what to read anymore, suddenly I was like very interested in reading. And then I've always like loved writing poetry, but I've never shared any of it with anybody from when I was very little. And I always loved writing songs. Um, and like used to like write musicals and stuff, and like all of them are probably horrible, but that's just like what made me happy when I was little. And I writing has just been this sort of constant thing that has post graduation really like has been this like 5-year journey of me learning that my writing doesn't have to be perfect. My writing doesn't have to look the way that other things that I read looks, but I just have to keep returning to it, because what I have learned is that it feels weird. Like when people are like, Andrew, you just have this way with words. That feels strange to even say out loud, because that's just how I express myself. And like, I feel like I, as a writer, have really grown through the experience of editing my book. And I mean, it has been through so many drafts. Um, I started writing that. I finished my book when I was on the Kinky Boots tour in 2019. I sent that to two friends. They edited it for a year. They sent it back to me. I started working on it more. I edited it for another year. Last year, I met a writing mentor. She recently published her own memoir, which you need to read. It's called American Daughter. It's absolutely beautiful. Her story is insane. Um, she's an Oregonian. And that happened. I connected with her. And then last spring during COVID, I got a bunch of beta readers, and was the first time I sort of took the leap of sending my book literally in printed form to like 15 people that read it and sent the edits back, people from all different walks of my life, different ages, different genders, different identities. Like, I just wanted to make sure I had this full scope. But I mean, in terms of like a writing practice, I will be honest, like that is something that ebbs and flows and constantly changes. When I when I get an idea, I have different things. When I get an idea that I know is something I want to turn into something, I will literally speak into my like voice memos, especially in New York. I have my best ideas in the shower and on the subway, which are very inconvenient. Um, and so voice memos is an amazing thing. Also, like if I'm on the subway and thinking about something, I will like just put I mean, the amount of notes. I got a new phone when I was in Oregon right before I came back in late February. And I'm standing at the T-Mobile store with the guy, and I'm like, listen to me. All you have to promise me is that the notes are going to transfer. Like, my life is in the notes on the phone. He's like, I promise they're going to transfer. I was like, no. You have to guarantee they're going to transfer. But so like,
Did they?
I am, what? Sorry, what?
Did they transfer?
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'd be in mourning still if they weren't. um, uh, but I'm at a place now where I love that you asked that question, because truly, like in the last few days, um, I've tried to like start a new sort of morning writing practice, because I get in these like creative slumps, and I'm now in this place where I'm working on so many different projects that are all related to writing. I'm working on slowly, like I just said, with my own memoir, which is fully my own, which I'm pursuing traditional publishing. I just sent some query letters out today to a few agents, so that's super exciting. But so that's happening sort of like in the background. I have an editor that I hired in November, who's randomly an Oregonian that I found online. And so he's been partnering with me. He's working on editing my book proposal right now. And so I'm just sort of like slowly chipping away at that. But that has fed my soul. My own writing has fed my soul for a very long time. So in the past few months, as I've been working on this other big book project for the theater community called When the Lights Are Bright Again, as that has been growing momentum, I have realized it literally feels like a piece of my body is missing. Like, not working on defining brave on a daily basis like I was when I was in Oregon. Because pre having this idea for When the Lights Are Bright Again and pre being back in New York, I had a daily writing practice. I was constantly in communication with my editor. I was very much like inundated with my memoir. And so it feels like this like piece of me is missing. So I'm trying to like get back to like carving out time throughout the week to be focusing on that. But I'm very thankful for the When the Lights Are Bright Again project, and it's going to be very, very special. That's going to come out in the fall. And I'm partnering with the Actors Fund, which is this incredible organization, and 90% of the profits from the sale of each book once it's online is going to benefit the Actors Fund to like put the money back into our industry. But it's these, everyone in a bunch of people in the industry have written these letters to self where and you can go on the website and look at that, some of them, to get a sort of a preview. But it's these like 200 letters from people all over the country in the theater community, Broadway, community theater, regional theaters. And people have, I had this idea. My friend was like, Andrew, the last fall, she was like, you should write a letter to yourself. I was just venting about how frustrated I was and how sad I was about everything I've lost. And people and the business and not being in New York and my friends. And she was like, you should write a letter to yourself. And I was like, that's a great idea. And suddenly it kind of became this. And all these months now, that was late October. I launched it in November, and now I have like 200 letters, and we have huge names in the theater community that we're taking photography of, and it's going to be this very, very special coffee table book, kind of love letter to the theater community. So I'm like, it's a pinch me moment for sure, because that has been this like lesson in how important collaboration is in life in general, and how like when you have an idea that you're passionate about, and when you ask others and believe in others to come on board and be like, hey, you have this skill that I do not have. The moment I did that with this friend of mine, Matthew Murphy, who's a renowned worldwide but Broadway photographer, the moment I brought him on, it changed the whole project in terms of exposure and in terms of people being so excited about this. And like my network of people has like tripled in 2 months in terms of like a social media presence, and like all of that stuff is just stuff. But in terms of like getting all of these like messages from people through the website, through their letter submissions, it's just been this beautiful picture of like life is so much more breathtaking every day when you allow yourself to be open to others. And like the amount of thank yous that people have said to me of like, Andrew, thank you for creating this space for us to like write these letters and to like let out everything we're feeling from this year. Like one person saying that to me makes the whole thing worth it. That's what like creating anything is. And so like that's its own project that is going to be something very, very, very cool that I'm very just honored even to be a part of now, even though it was literally my idea. It feels like it's kind of happening in front of me, and I'm like not even at it yet, and I like see it becoming and blossoming into something, which is so exciting. So that's like a pinch me moment of like every time more and more people come on board, it's like this feeling that's like very, very scary of like, this book is going to change my life this fall, fully change my life. I don't know that I'm ready for that. But I'm very excited. And then I have this separate book project called Be Soft Man, 100 Thoughts on Strengthening Our Vulnerability Muscle, which is a quote book that is sort of going to be a prequel to my memoir. And that's going to come out probably winter now. I was hoping for June, but we're changing some timelines. But that's coming out in probably the winter or the very beginning of next year. And that is sort of the impetus to writing that was sort of this like love letter to my nephew, and sort of me wanting to create this. It's dedicated to him, and sort of create this space to normalize this conversation of like, the world is going to tell you that you need to be tough and strong and the best, but like I think that like your secret weapon is being vulnerable and being soft and being gentle and being connected to people and being kind to yourself. And I just want to like normalize that in men and in everybody. And so that is its own thing too that I'm currently working on. But yeah, I think my writing practice constantly changes. But in terms of deciding what to share and what to not share, uh, I am such a, I wish I could, my answer to that was like, oh, I have all these things I'm like waiting to share. I mean, I'm a very anxious person. And when I get an idea, I just don't sleep until it's done. And so my reactions to things, especially with writing, often happen like when that thing is happening. And I just want to like put it out there. And maybe I should be like caring more and editing it more and working more to create it and make it more something. But it just is me. It just is what it is. And so, uh, so yeah, I mean, to answer that part of it, like there's no, to be fully transparent, there's no real like rhyme or reason to my madness.
No, that's
I
cool.
wish there was, and I am trying to be a little bit more regimented because I think for certain places in my life, I find more freedom by having a little bit of structure. Whereas when you are fully like ready to like create all the content, have all the time in the world, that is very paralyzing.
Mhm. I have two questions. One, I just want to say, like, I appreciate the way that you're honest about, like, this is what I do. I wish I could do it this way, but I also, this is who I am. And I think that comes back to, like, you know yourself best, and you're like, it'll figure itself out. And your ideas go where they need to go. And it sounds like you accept that, even if it's terrifying, because you have no idea where they're going to go, which kind of is what I heard you saying about coming back to school for students. It's like, it's
Yeah.
happening. We have no idea what we're doing, but it's happening and we're all
Yes.
doing it together. And that last part is the only part that actually matters because we will all figure
Right.
it out together.
Right.
And so thinking back to, well, you don't have to think back to yourself as a high school if you don't want to, but a common experience that I spend a lot of time talking about prior to the pandemic, and I imagine it will come back up, is just the experience of like being rejected for being yourself, or feeling like you're finally at that point where you're like, I'm gonna be brave, not to use your language, but like I'm gonna be brave and finally show up as myself.
Oh,
And
that's not my language.
it doesn't work. And it doesn't work, or it doesn't work the way you want, or there's 10 people in the room and you really only cared what one person thought, and that person doesn't like your idea or doesn't like you, and maybe even, it can go really dark places.
Yeah.
Maybe not how do you keep yourself okay in that, but like, how do you let yourself not be okay, but not go too far? Like, how do you hold space for yourself? Because I think we will have many people that want support in that in the future, but we've also all been by ourselves a lot this last year.
Right.
And so it's okay to manage it by yourself for a little bit. And so how do you deal with, like, whether you want to label that rejection or whatever you want to label it? How do
Right.
you not let that break you?
I think there's two sides to that. And the first is I have never been able to subscribe to this whole notion of like, just don't care what anybody thinks. Because I think I think that that's kind of a lie. I think it's about mindset, and I think it's about who do you care what they think about you. It's not it can't be everybody because nothing is everything. And I think for me, everything in life comes back to like, it has to come back to your why. Like, you have to be really crystal clear about your intentions and why you're doing something. I mean, that could be as simple as like asking somebody on a date, or uh like coming out to your parents. And if you are making choices because you think that that choice is what others expect or want from you, you are now living outside of your body. Like you are now making choices and decisions. You are letting the noise dictate you. And that's why what I mean by like, I think that it's two-sided is like, I think that we're kind of told that like the way to be successful is to just like brush it off, like don't care what anybody else thinks. And I think that like that can be really damaging to your own soul. And I think that also like suddenly you can just become a person that no one wants to be around. And I think that it's about finding this like wrong word, Andrew. It's about finding balance between listening to your gut and your intuition telling you like what it is that you want when something is not, back to what you said at the beginning, like consent, like when something feels uneasy, I guarantee you that like that first feeling in anything is always correct. And then like the noise of life, preconceived notions, what other people have told us, people being like, no, 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 you're going to be fine. If your body is telling you that like, I don't like this, I promise you that if you force yourself to do it later, you will calm down and you will remember when your body felt like that and you will be so mad at yourself. I do that all the time. But it's just about like navigating and getting better at having, which I think just comes with age. Like, and I think that I'm still bad at that, and I think that I hope that it will get better as I get older, is just navigating that conversation, that like getting better and better and better and stronger at like recognizing when your body is telling you those things, and not being afraid. Because I also will say, I think especially women are told to not, and this is like another whole thing with like my podcast and like what I'm very passionate about in my life. I think women, especially in our world, in our country, are like told to like not ask questions, and are like shamed for, anyone's shamed for asking questions, but like we are like told that like we're told that like vulnerability is not strong, and we are told that like asking a question is weakness. And like, I'm here to tell you that like the most amazing people in my life are the people that are like, I'm not the smartest person in the room and I would like to learn. Like, those are the people that I look at and I'm like, that person is a badass, because they know what they're really good at and they will preach that till the cows come home. But they are equally okay with saying, I need help with that, and that. And I know that you're really good at that, and you're really good at that. So I'm going to bring all of you onto my metaphorical team of life, and we're going to help each other. And I think that that's what it's about. And now I've literally forgotten what the original question was.
The original question was some phrasing of like, how do you not let rejection break you? And what I hear you saying is like, decide whose opinion and whose voice matters and whose voice is noise.
Yes, and be okay with checking in with those people. Be okay with, because you have to surround yourself with people that see you and see your why and see what you're trying to get at, that can hold you accountable and be like, hey, you told me that like the reason you're trying to go after this project, or the reason that assignment is so important to you, or like the reason that you're having that problem with your sibling, you keep saying that like what you're wanting is this and this. Can I challenge you to realize that like doing that is not going to get you to your why? So I think it comes back to like, if you aren't willing to be transparent with someone you trust, or even yourself, about why you're doing anything, I guarantee you that you will be disappointed by the outcome. And the outcome will often be dictated not by you, because you will not be in control anymore. But I think the control comes back to like what I said before. Like, I don't mean control by being like, you are always in charge. Like, in those moments where I have to raise my hand and ask a question and be vulnerable and say, I need help in anything, in any facet of my life, I need help because I don't understand. I am going to get at my goal in whatever it is, maybe. I'm going to get at my why better by saying, okay, my next path on this, my next step on this, my next stepping stone to get to my why and to get to my goal. I actually am really terrified of jumping to that, because I have no idea how to navigate that. But you do. or you've done that, or like that, and that's what it's about. I mean, in terms of rejection, like that's what that's what my career is. Like my life is walking into a room, having people that I'm trying to prove myself to, sitting behind a table. It's very intimidating. It will never not be intimidating. I think no matter how many times I do it, I talk to so many people that have had incredible, illustrious careers. They are still so terrified when they go into an audition room. And I think some of it comes with that. Like you got to just like, you got to throw caution to the wind and be like, this is my time and I love doing what I do. But I think it comes back to like, I can only compare it to my own journey and my own craft. Like the best advice I ever got was like, if you stop caring if you 100% stop caring about what the people in the room think, I think that then you've kind of like you've lost the why, you've lost why you do it. And I think it's about, like I said, who do you care about what they think and why are you there and who are you doing this for? Like I've walked into many of an audition room and my why has been desperation. My why has been, I just really need a job. And I'm here to tell you that I didn't get those jobs. And that came through with the way that I sang, the way that I didn't sing well, the way that I flubbed my words, the way I was flat or sharp or anywhere else, the way I lost the words to my monologue, whatever it may be. I can just compare this to like life, like the metaphor of what it is for me in my industry is like every time I have booked a job, it has been because I have been crystal clear about I am going into this room today to share this song that I love singing with these people. And we are going to have this interaction. And it's that deep. Like, it doesn't need to be more complicated. But truly, every time I've walked in and it's been like, oh my God, I'm so perfect for this. I just like, this has to be my job. It never happens because I'm bringing that energy into storytelling and performing of this thing that I do love to do. And that comes back to like mindset. So I think that's like a metaphor for how we can approach life or anything. Like if you are engaging and approaching anything with fear of rejection, before anything ever happens, if you already are expecting to fail, you've failed. Mm-hmm. Like if you go into anything though, changing your mindset and expecting to just learn something from that encounter or to just show up and be like, you know what, I'm really terrified by whatever this day may bring, whatever this class may bring. I do not like those two people, but I just got assigned to do a group project with them in science class. Like all of those things come and it's like, how do we navigate them? If you tell yourself, like we are who we tell ourselves we are, if you tell yourself the narrative for a week leading up to doing that group project that it is going to be awful, then it probably will be awful. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I want to also honor everyone's time. I have more time and I'm fascinated by these conversations and want to make sure that anyone who has any other questions has a chance to ask them and recognize that if you have other things that you need to be going and doing, please do them. And so the questions that we've been through are the ones that I had myself and then was given. And so I want to let folks know that like if you have to go, you have to go. But if you have a few more minutes and anyone here has questions that they want to ask, feel free to unmute or type in the chat and I'll read your question out loud. And yeah, this has been such a, rich second experience. And I know when I rewatched the recording, I was like, oh, I think we talked about all kinds of other things other than what we expected, but every conversation, it goes where it needs to go. Exactly. And I think one of my favorite yoga teachers used to say this thing that annoyed me when we would start late. She'd be like, we're starting just on time. And I'm like, no, we're starting 7 minutes late. But it's true. Like things happen the way they need to happen. And I don't say that to minimize bad things. That's not what I mean by that. Right. People who say that in hard times, I think they just don't know what to say. There's a book I was given after a hard time in life called There's No Good Card for This. And I think I've said that phrase many times to others because sometimes there's no good card. And so sometimes the best thing you can say is, I don't know what to say, but I'm going
I
to sit here.
love that. I
Hmm.
love that. Oh God, it's like you can't fix everything with the Hallmark aisle.
Hmm. So yeah, does anyone, Erica, or does anyone have any questions that you want to add, or do you have anything else that you're dying to share with us today?
Oh goodness, I don't think so.
I really appreciated hearing about your creative process. I often refer back to, there's a girl I went to high school named Taylor. She recently dropped 2 albums in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh
And
my
when I
gosh.
was, when we were in high school, I remember like I mentioned, I grew up in Nashville and I was like, oh, another person moving to Nashville to make music. Look at her go. It worked. So do what you want
This.
and, let the haters hate, as she would say, because chasing your dreams is really, that's the only way you get to your dreams. People often would
Right.
say that, and the cliches are probably true. It's something I've learned repeatedly over the last few years. So,
Yeah.
and there's a quote on that. I think we are what we repeatedly do. I have no idea who said it. I'm sure it's been attributed to many people, but it's true. Whether we think good things or we think things might not work, that's how they go.
Right.
So,
Right.
I guess my question is, it's not really a question. It's advice on, hold on. Advice on giving advice.
Mm. Could talk about that for a week. Lay it on me.
So I guess the best way is like a scenario. So like someone asks for advice that you know about and have personally been through, but what to give as advice and what to let them go through themselves.
Mm.
How do you separate that?
That can be a very hard thing. That just comes back to like boundaries. I think. I think it's just about establishing. I read this thing at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think it was Glennon Doyle, who I love. Um, and she was talking on one of her Instagram lives or something that she posted about the difference between listening to hear and listening to speak. And I think it comes back to, she talked about all these different types of listeners and like what kind of like figuring out being with yourself and figuring out what kind of listener you are first. And I'm tying this into your question, I promise. I think it's, as when you're a friend to someone, I think it's being really crystal clear about like, how do you show up for other people? And I've really struggled with this in my life. I have had a lot of friendships that have been rocky in certain times, especially in college, where it eventually was putting a strain on the relationship because I felt like I was the person that this friend was always coming to for advice, but I felt like I never got to like have fun with her. I felt like at moments I felt like I was literally her grief counselor, and I didn't ever realize that was happening until like I could look at it from a bird's eye view later. Because when it was happening, I was just, that's the kind of person I am. Like I just like was happy to be there and to be there for her. But I realize now that like I wish I would have had, to tie this back into the Glennon Doyle thing, I wish I would have had and heard this video of her saying like, when people sit down with you and they want to vent about something or they want to ask you for advice, she talks in this thing about, and I'll try to find it and send it to you, because she talks about how like you have to be really open and set a boundary with someone and be like, what do you need from me in this conversation? And that like changed everything. That changed my like own family dynamic during the pandemic at home, when I alluded to before of like, it was the first time I've lived with my parents under the same roof 24/7 in a decade, and it was very hard. So when you're like, it's about, I think when you have a friend reach out, or a family member, or a sibling, your parent, whatever it may be, I think before you even go down the road of giving advice, I think it's about, because it comes back to expectations. Sometimes someone's gonna be like, and this is what Glennon talks about, sometimes someone's going to say, I just need you to be there and to like hear all of this and to take all of it, and I don't need anything back. And the thing is that like I have gotten myself in trouble of giving people advice in moments in my life where I wish I would have had that language and heard this thing from Glennon to be able to say to a friend, what do you need from me in this moment? Because there have been so many times where I've almost like missed their why or their intention or what they needed from me in that moment because I was literally listening to them and like thinking about all of my responses and how helpful I was going to be with my advice on the receiving end when they were done talking. And then I hear this thing at the beginning of the pandemic and I'm like, oh my gosh, more often than not, I am often that kind of listener. And I don't like that about myself. I want to be the kind of person that can, like, if someone's like, Andrew, I'm telling you this because I know you've gone through it. Like you said, I know you've gone through this and I want to hear about what your experience was. And that's what it is. It's like setting the boundary before you even go down that road. Try to have, even if it takes 20 seconds to have the conversation and the dialogue, if you have the time or if the person you're with has it in them to be able to sort of pause what they're like the nonstop train that they might be on of what they need to have a device for or whatever. If it's afforded to you, and hopefully it will be, have the space to set the boundary of both of you to be able to say what you can give and what they're expecting of you as a friend or as a loved one in that moment, because that's going to allow you to show up for them the way that they need instead of the way that you think is going to serve them best. And I think that that just comes from like being really transparent about being like, hey, what kind of advice are you looking for? Because what you don't want, and this has happened to me so many times, is like I start telling myself this narrative in my head that I am a bad friend when I start as an empath owning when they do or don't take the advice I gave them. And then I'm observing as an outsider, they came to me, I'm observing them make decisions, observing how they are on social media, observing when I go out with a big group of friends, and it's like, I'm observing that we had this private, intimate, special connection, and they asked me to show up for them. I did. And because of my own ego and my own expectations, and because I didn't get crystal clear about asking them what they needed from my advice, I now am like owning like their trauma. I am owning the decisions they're making, but that's not my story. And so I would just, I don't, is that helpful? I would just encourage you to like, I mean, you had sort of said like, how do you do that and navigate like not getting yourself involved? But I think it just comes back to like asking the person what it is they really want and need from you. Um, and then that will kind of tell you how much of your own story to get involved. But I also think it comes back to like language. No one's ever said this to me before, and I've been very like my mind has been blown in the last like 6 months of realizing like how often we all say to each other, I totally understand. That is the most I've now realized like how triggering that can be to someone, how triggering it is to me in certain ways of my life. Like, and that just comes back to asking someone, which is that's the thing, is like it's a control thing for us as humans. We want to be helpful. We want to have the answers. We want to have that will never, it's not a bad thing, but that will never not be the case. A human being, you want to show up for someone and help them, and then it feels good to know that like maybe you gave somebody good advice. Like that is normal. But the part where it gets sticky and gets hard with any relationship, and especially friends, is like if you're not crystal clear, like I said, about what they might need, suddenly those broken expectations can cause tension and cause a rift between the two of you that never needed to be there if you both were just honest with your expectations from that one interaction. And I think that that just comes from time and from practice and from just like asking, because like when people say, hey, give me advice, like you said, like that can mean a lot of stuff. And I think that we often kind of equate it and make it kind of oversimplify that. So when I heard this, I've got to find it for you and send it to you, because when I heard this, it just, I mean, she like laid out like I think it was 7 or 8 different ways of showing up for someone, and like of the language of getting specific about what that person might need. And it just rocked my world, because I was like, oh my gosh, there really are so many different ways that we can listen to others. And oh my gosh, Andrew, you spend so much time like listening to save the day. Stop. Like, just listen to learn. And it's also like, we want to listen so that we have something to say and give them advice the moment they're done talking. But like, don't be afraid. She talks about this. Don't be afraid of like sitting inside of silence and thinking about what you want to respond with, of what your advice might be. And also like, it's okay to not have the answer. And that's the other thing, is like, when you get crystal clear about those expectations, you can be honest with a dear friend of like, I might not have the answers to anything you're going to be asking me, but like, let's go on this journey together, and I'm always here for you. I think it's just about, at the end of the day, being transparent and really like owning what you can bring to the advice. I hope that's helpful. That's a very hard question.
What I would ask is, when you see someone who isn't willing to take the advice you want to offer or they've asked for, how do you hold a boundary while also being their friend? If you know that, maybe they're not taking your advice for their own choice, but also they're not getting healthier in the thing that they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely, that exact situation is what happened with that friend I talked about in college. And it eventually got to the point, ironically, she pushed me away. And it was like, I think the sentence was, I just need time, and for us to, it felt like a friend breakup. It was like, I just need time, and I just need to not be around you because I feel like you know too much about me. And her saying that was like the first time, I mean, I went into like 7 months of like doubting who I was as a person, because I had put so much stock into being her person, that like my identity in a small way that I didn't realize was a very big way in college, was, and this was very early on in college, was wrapped up in like being there for her. And then I was finding myself having animosity when she was like, again, making the same decisions, still coming to me for advice. And then it felt like it was driving a wedge between our relationship. And then I almost felt responsible for her, and then angry that felt like a broken record for giving advice. And I'm like, okay, but like, I can't be in your body and make you make decisions and change your behavior. Like, you are saying out loud that you want help, and you're saying that you know that these are unhealthy choices. There's no judgment. If there was judgment, I wouldn't be giving you the time of day. Like, you're asking for my opinion, but it eventually got to the place after she did that, when we finally became friends again. And that was really hard. But like, us rekindling that was kind of a beautiful thing. It was a mess, but it was beautiful, a beautiful mess. But when that happened, I fully had to say to her, I was like, when it comes to that specific situation, that kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back, I was like, I need you to rely on somebody else. Because, and that was the boundary I had to set, where I was like, I am here for you for everything that you might need to talk about at any moment. That specific isolated thing that felt like what broke up our relationship, I was like, I have to ask you that we can't talk about that, because it hurts too much. It brings up too much trauma. And unless you are going to make that change, and I don't know that I even said that. I think it was just me being like, moving forward, if we're going to be friends, like, I don't want to talk to you about that. I don't want to know how that relationship with him is going. Like, I cannot give you advice about that, because it is just like, because you own a certain piece of, when you give advice, when someone wants to know how it's connected to your own life, you start owning that. And so then that's what I mean. It drove this like wedge. So it was becoming unhealthy for me to to be that person for her for that specific part of her life. And so that, yeah, it just comes back to boundaries of being like, no one, even like in a marriage, like no one can be your everything. That is way too much to expect of someone. So we can't do that with friends. And like, I had to learn that of like, I thought she was my person and like my best friend to rely on for everything. And then I had to like, when that breakup of sorts, whatever happened, I realized I was like, wow, this was very one-sided. That was very painful to go through. It felt like I was grieving the loss of this friend. It felt like, I mean, I saw her every day, but there was this like, in terms of grief, it felt like this like person that in my mind I was telling myself this, we had this equal relationship. It felt like that person had like died almost. That sounds dramatic, but like that's what the grief felt like, of her being out of my life and actively like saying like, we were on student government together and I had to sit at a weekly meeting next to her and just like pretend like everything was fine. And people were like, are you guys good? And I'm like, she wants some space. Like, it was so hard. And it's like, and our relationship has never been the same after that. But I look back and I am proud of myself for when she returned, for saying, no, we're not going to just go back to the way it was before, because I've now learned from this time and how painful this time was. I've sat with my own thoughts and I've realized that I don't like when you treat me this way and this way. And I need a new boundary for those things so that we can enjoy everything else that's wonderful about our relationship. But that boundary has to be there. Otherwise, you're being taken advantage of. And that's what I had to learn. It took a lot of time, which I didn't like. I wanted it to be solved because of the pain from losing her really sucked. But yeah.
Thanks. And again, it all circles back to that, like knowing yourself and trusting yourself enough to say that this is what I need and this is who I am.
Right.
Which, there's no getting there. It's just a lifelong process, I think. So,
right.
Thanks again for making time for us today.
Of course. Thank you. I love this. And I hope we can do it again in the coming months.
We've got time and we've got Chromebooks. So
we got time and laptops and Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So here we go.
Mm-hmm. And thanks for those of you that came today that asked questions today and gave me questions before. Thursday, we will be meeting again, same time,